Welcome to Speaking of Excellence, the official podcast of the Quality Professionals Awards for Further Education and Employability. I am Doyle, I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Mesma, and we were ecstatic to launch the awards with our partners, the Institute of Employability Professionals and the awarding organisation OAL, alongside the many sponsors and supporters who joined us last year. Our main aim was to celebrate quality in our sectors and showcase the exceptional individuals, teams and organisations who embrace quality improvement. Just in case you're wondering if it's happening in 2025, the answer is of course it is. So please head to the awards website, qualityprofessionalsawards.org, in order to register so you can keep up to date with all of the information, as well as finding out about the categories and when the award ceremony will take place. However, let's turn back to the podcast. Speaking of Excellence is going to give you an opportunity to meet the finalists as we drop a topic in front of them in each episode to explore as a group. In this particular episode, I had the pleasure of meeting Jogita Govind from Travis Perkins, Andy Tait from Performance Learning Group, and Dani Duric from Read in Partnership. It was such a privilege to talk about what we really mean when we say having a continuous improvement mindset. There's a lot to take away from this one. I absolutely enjoyed the focus on creating the conditions for individuals to feel like they have the autonomy to truly generate incremental change, whatever job role they happen to be in. So without further ado, let me hand you over to Jogita, Andy and Dani to take it from here. It is wonderful to have you here and to see Andy and Dani and Jogita with us. I'll get them to give us a wave to anyone who is watching this online as opposed to enjoying the audio version. I'm absolutely delighted to have you here. And the topic that we're going to grapple with this afternoon in our toing and froing on a Friday afternoon, which is when we record this, when we are at our freest to just chat Friday afternoon, is I dropped a topic on you and said I'm really keen to explore how we go about developing a continuous improvement mindset. And each of you represent a slightly different dynamic across the FE and employability sectors. And I'd really like it if we can kind of unravel some of that, if that's okay with you guys today. I'm going to ask you an opening question, if I may. Who shall I send this to? Oh, Andy, go on, I'll give it to you first. So I wonder... Actually, tell us, say something about the job that you're in. And what I'm particularly interested in your response is there any way that your understanding of quality has changed over time in relation to where you are within your career? So let me give that one to you, and then I'll come to Dani, and then I'll come to Gita.
Short answer is yes, but I will elaborate on that slightly. So I started my role in quality as an IV, as we used to be back in the day. So my job was very much focused around qualification delivery, and it was very much around sort of like ensuring that assessment requirements were met, learning outcomes and assessment criteria were satisfied prior to claiming qualifications either at the end of the program or looking at interim checks within the learner journey as well. I think probably the biggest shift in that happened with the introduction of apprenticeship standards. So being an apprenticeship training provider, the removal of those qualifications and the removal of that safety net around assessment criteria and learning outcomes kind of led all of us, certainly in my organisation, sort of sitting and scratching our heads a little bit in terms of where do we go with this? How do we quality assure something that's so intangible that actually, there's no requirements around this assessment anymore, other than the endpoint assessment. What we do on program is completely fluid and completely flexible in terms of whatever we want that curriculum to look like is kind of up to us as an organization. And I think that that's been one of the biggest changes. And, we were talking just before about the focus on teaching and learning, and that was one of the biggest things that we found within my organization. So we very much focused on the value of teaching and learning and the journey that learner went on. But I also think that there's been a real focus on employer engagement as an introduction of the apprenticeship levy, and also with standards being so employer led, and the impact that has on organizations as well, that all of that has sort of had to have been factored in foundation to our quality assurance strategies in terms of, how do we look at everything end to end rather than just focusing on outcomes. It's been amazing, to be honest with you, because from a quality assurance perspective, it allows us to just have a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more freedom around it as well. So we're not stuck in this internal verification loop that we always were. And actually, we find so much more out about our learners' journey and the impact that our apprenticeship programs are having on both learners and employers, mainly from just going and talking to people. So that's been one of the most fundamental things that has been useful for us as an organization in our QA strategies, which was always sort of like a side thought. As back in the day, it was almost one of those things that we did just so that we had some quantitative data that we could look at. But actually now it kind of forms such a fundamental part of our strategy that loads of our quality improvement strategies and changes come off the back of that feedback.
It's quite a nice follow on actually, because the podcast that we recorded with some of the other guys where we talked about assessor to educator, they were picking up on exactly that same piece. Some of it around saying that actually nothing changed in some ways, but everything changed in others. And actually, they said similarly to you, it's been for the better. That doesn't mean to say that the apprenticeship reforms has always been easy for us to navigate, and there's some things around it that I'm sure we would rather weren't there at times, but it has moved the dial on the way that we go about quality assuring and certainly made it broader and more encompassing. So it's a great point to make, Dani. So let's head into employability, and put a different spin on it. So same question for you, to kind of up to the point where you've got to today. How has your view on what quality means and what it looks like changed?
Where potentially employability differs quite significantly from further education is we always now ask ourselves, what intervention have I delivered that's improved that participant's quality of experience on our services, looking at it from their perspective, as well as what we're needing to do to meet our contractual obligation, with the commissioners. Having now sort of moved into more of continuous improvement, moving into innovation and strategy, I'm looking at it now from a completely different lens where our participant voice is the most important thing in how we deliver quality. And really, we've got still so much to learn about what our participants are experiencing on their journey and how that then impacts the quality of service they receive from really quite an organic place. They're telling us everything they need to know and everything we need to know about their journey. We've just got to be listening for it. So I think for me, that's definitely been the biggest shift that I've seen. And that's only been in maybe like a 4-year period. But yeah, definitely agree that there's been quite a change.
There's a couple of things in that, isn't there? Actually, picking up on both of your points, that if you go back to a more traditional understanding of lean improvement techniques. So if I go for that as the example, the way that you always taught that and positioned that, and certainly I was in my corporate life, was you come at it from a customer pull perspective. So in service and manufacturing, that's the essence of lean improvement. Everything is from a customer pull inwards, and actually that translates regardless of the sector. I think there's something I've noticed, and I agree with you actually in the change you've talked about across FE and employability. It was one thing us collecting that data. It's been quite another thing how we've used that data in practice. And I think you make a good point, Dani, that probably within Department for Work and Pensions provision, that for a long time that emphasis was so firmly on compliance, whether something was done, whether or not whether it was done well. And I've definitely noticed that shift in the past few years in how we're kind of starting to think of that. Not that that was wrong, but actually in great, it happens, tick the box. Secondly, does it happen, and does it happen well for the benefit of the people that you are trying to support into work? Thanks, Dani. Jogita, let me come to you. Same question. Tell us about the same view.
Yeah, so I've been in the quality space for about 15 years now. Agree with what Andy and Dani are saying. So with the shift from frameworks to standards, as an employer, we now have a voice. So we're working with quite a lot of the EPOs in terms of the trailblazers and having a voice in terms of what does that standard look like. However, I'm going to throw a bit of a spanner in the works here. I think the fundamental quality principles haven't changed. and they haven't evolved. And it's just, we've moved along with digital enhances, or whether it's the interventions we've had to change, but the fundamentals of positive learner experience, a relevant curriculum, a great teaching and learning, and just a safe and supportive teaching environment, those quality fundamentals haven't changed, but the interventions and how we apply it has changed. So that's my thinking on it.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I agree with that.
One of the things I've learned, Dani, through doing the work with the Institute of Employability Professionals and David Imbert, the Good Employability Company, when we built the framework for the employability sector, is the criticality of that relationship between the participant and that member of your team is literally the thing that everything else revolves around. And that means it might seem so obvious to people who are listening, aren't they? But when there's so much to have to think about, you can sometimes lose sight of the criticality of that relationship. So you've got a new member of staff joins your organisation. They're coming in a frontline role. We'll start with them and then we'll talk about leaders. They're coming in a frontline role, and you've been asked to go in and meet them and talk about what a continuous improvement mindset is. What does that look like, and how would you describe that to someone in order that they can latch onto it and think they've got a role to play in continuous improvement? Because the risk is that it's done by a department, it's their job over there, as opposed to it being the mindset of everyone within the organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I've actually done quite a bit of in the last couple of weeks, even new mentees that I've got in my program, or new starters. And I think the first thing we always say is that definition of, yes, continuous improvement is a support function within Reed, but it is a mindset. That is the very first statement that we make to any new starter. And to break it down, I think we really try and emphasize that any of our front row staff play the most important role in being the first to identify opportunities. We're not going to hear about improvement opportunities from people that are far detached from what our participants need in terms of quality of service. That's always going to come directly from the front line. So I think for us, it's really making sure that they see their value in bringing those ideas to the forefront. And then predominantly it's about curiosity. So having that curiosity to just question. People that come into Reed in Partnership may have come from different backgrounds. We've had all walks of life come through to be employment advisors and the like. What did you do in your previous organisation? What questions did you have about how things are being done, and what approaches did you take that worked really well for you? We're not precious. We want to hear it all, because those ideas form your experience of what your company is going to be for you, and we want to hear about it. So it's just really making sure that we create that safe space right from the get-go to say, be curious, ask the question, think about what's worked well in the past, and think about how that could be applied to your new role.
Oh, there's so much to unravel in there.
Oh, we're off with a bang.
I'm going to dive in first, and I'm going to get Andy and Jogita to ask you stuff about what you've just said, and then relate it back into their organisations. So my question, Dani, is: am I right in saying that you guys have what's called a continuous improvement academy at Reed in Partnership?
Yes.
Have I picked that up correctly? So tell us
Absolutely.
a bit about what is that, and what does it mean, and why is it there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Continuous Improvement Academy is something that we've developed internally that runs alongside any of our other learning and development opportunities that all co-members across our business can access. So, we're thinking of this alongside of how to be a manager, future managers in the business. Well, Continuous Improvement Academy is just another opportunity that they can take for their own professional development. So within Continuous Improvement Academy, yes, we do look at things such as having a lean mindset, looking at methodologies, Six Sigma, etc., and how that can be applied on a practical basis. But the biggest takeaway from that is really embedding what a CI mindset is. That is offered to all of our staff. Anyone that joins the business once they've passed probation can get involved in that. And we've actually really recently now become our own accreditors. So anyone that takes part in that academy can also get the qualification equivalent to a yellow belt in Lean Six Sigma. So it holds a lot of weight within the organisation, and we've seen some incredible success. I started my continuous improvement journey as one of the first waves going on to Continuous Improvement Academy, and then had the confidence to then apply for the CI manager role. So it's a really important stepping stone that we've now got within the business to kind of platform continuous improvement at the get-go.
Thank you. And Andy, so when you heard Dani there talk about this notion of having to have a safe space in order to be curious, and that being relevant to all staff, just unravel that a bit for me. What would that mean in your context within your organisation?
Yeah, I mean there were a lot of things that Dani was saying that I was sat here just like nodding
Yeah.
away. So we've had some experiences within the organization, from a curriculum development perspective, because curriculum development has been built by a separate department within the organization, and then it's been rolled out operationally to the team. And we kind of found, to begin with some of our more, newer trainers, new to the training role, new to the FE sector, that they were sort of just taking that as gospel, and they were like, oh, okay, well, this is my product and I have to go away and I have to deliver this now. And actually, we've got on a real journey, probably not to the extent that you guys have at Reading Partnership, but just encouraging our team to really interrogate the curriculum and really sort of like triangulate how that corresponds with the apprenticeship standards and then the apprenticeship assessment plans as well, and actually providing that safe space and encouraging that open conversation in terms of come to us or come to me as a curriculum developer and sort of say, I can see this and I can see why you're doing this, because I can see how that relates to the apprenticeship standard and what we're aiming to deliver. But I think there are better ways of doing it. Or actually, I think in practice that doesn't work as well as perhaps you have intended it to.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, like it's been a while since I've delivered apprenticeship standards as a trainer or as a tutor. So that's completely valid, because my brain works in a very strange way in comparison to a lot of other people's brains as well. And actually, my intention for that curriculum and how I've intended it to be delivered may not be practical in terms of what our employers are looking for as well. So we've gone on like a really organic journey with our entire training team just to facilitate some of that interrogation and coming back to us, and that feed forward as well as feedback on those apprenticeship standards and the curriculum that we are developing. And actually it's meant that our programs have changed quite a lot over the last 3 years or so. So yeah, I completely agree with Dani. I think that's fundamentally important within FE and skills for sure.
When you're in a heavily regulated space, sometimes the role of quality can be heavily biased towards a role of evaluator and lose the essence of the role of researcher. And for me, we need to sometimes get back more to that. How do we encourage people to have the mindset of a researcher rather than the mindset of an evaluator? Because that's how you stay curious, right? I know myself, when I'm in evaluation mode, then I'm looking at standards, I'm looking at benchmarks, I'm looking at whatever it might be. So therefore, there is a risk that I lose some of that researcher mindset because I'm going into it with a kind of different lens. And we talk about that when we're teaching observers, for example, go in with the spirit of research. And I think when we get that from how do I research my own practice, so that self-reflective model of what I do, whether it would be with a participant, whether it be when I'm teaching, and then you're layering that right the way through the organisation, then that to me is where I guess I feel most comfortable thinking about what I mean by continuous improvement mindset. So Jogita, talk to me about the role of leadership in that, Jogita, because I know when I walk into an organisation, it's very easy for me to spot where I can see those as words, but the reality of the culture is that's not really what's going on around here.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is to recognise is that quality, continuous improvement doesn't just sit within a quality function. We empower our teams, our colleagues. So we set up working groups, which are now called task to finish groups, so there's a clear deadline, where we discuss openly around what's in the improvement plan, what are the improvements, and get a variety, a wide range of stakeholders involved to be involved in that. What does that continuous improvement look like? And it's okay not to be good at something as long as we're looking at ways to improve it. So there's a lot within that. And at leaders, we've just got to use the data to make we've got to drive decision making with the data and just make sure that we're leveraging.
Couldn't agree with you more, Jogita, honestly.
We've got that data. So
Yeah, I'm like nodding, like, yes, yeah, totally agree.
So I think it's about mentoring your future leaders as well, to make sure that we talked about that mindset, is making sure that they've got that continuous improvement mindset. And a lot of that is about celebrating success. It's about rewarding. So it's just making sure that we're recognizing that those that are on that journey, that we are recognizing the impact that's had overall.
Yeah. I liked what you said about that kind of small incremental steps to success. I mean, every 1% improvement is going to add up to 100% eventually. That's what needs to be championed. And then that's where I think it really comes down to the individual as well as the leadership, is that if you've got 100 individuals, if every single individual makes that 1% increase, then you're going to go leaps and bounds. But I really agree with that.
Like, I remember one of my quality leads starting the team, and my opening words to her was, continuing improvements is not a destination, it's a journey. So I don't expect to fix things straight away. It will be a journey. So we're not for the end goal straight away.
I think, from an operational perspective as well, there is a real challenge in terms of making that change and making those improvements measurable and impactful, but also incremental as well. So, not throwing too much on people too quickly, because then you kind of lose sight of what you're looking to achieve, as an end goal completely as well. To me, as a quality leader, it's not about, as you quite rightly say, Jogita, it's not about getting to that point as quickly as possible. It's about making steps towards getting to that point in a way that's going to actually have the best impact at the right time as well, and also doing it in the right way. Considering all of these different stakeholders that we're all trying to juggle, whether it be learners, employers, board members, regulators, there's a lot of people that we kind of have to keep happy whilst we're kind of like navigating this world.
You've all in different yet ways talked about the importance of empowerment and how you get people on the front line to be comfortable in taking responsibility for change. So how do you square that with the challenge of inconsistency? So where is the line between we want people to, or is there a line between we want people to be able to have freedom to change and to do things, but equally we also need some things to be consistent?
Go on, Andy.
I was just going to say, so we kind of coin a term within PLG in terms of, we refer to it as freedom within a framework. So we have the framework of delivery, and we have our curriculum plan, and we have the fundamental requirements in terms of the standards that we want to uphold. And then the incremental changes or the flexibility that each of our operators can make to those curriculum areas, that's something that they all sort of explore to varying degrees. And we often find that there's a real apprehension to do that to begin with, almost like an anxiety of doing something wrong. Like all of a sudden quality is just going to like jump on them and go, why are you doing it that way? That's not how it was planned to do. But one of the great things about quality improvement, and specifically in FE and skills, again, with the movement away from frameworks and qualifications, is if something does go wrong, it's really not end of days, and there's always the opportunity for you to do it better again in the future. So, again, picking up on some of those quality improvement points, highlighting something through quality assurance activity, just looking at what's been going on, talking to your employers, talking to your learners, talking to your customers, and actually going, did that land the way that it was intended to land? And then developing a strategy in terms of what can be done moving forward off the back of that as well. So I think that, it's about having the fundamental requirements of what has to happen so that our learners achieve as they should achieve and that they get from A to B. And then it's about encouraging and also holding people's hands while they explore what that difference looks like. And all trainers have their own way of delivering, tutors have their own preferences around teaching strategies and things like that. And also learners have their own strategies as well. And it's impossible to factor all of that into a curriculum plan. So, educating our trainers, educating the educators, if you like, in terms of what's available to them and how they can utilize that. And that's something that we find particularly useful, delivering across such a wide area as well. We're a nationwide training provider. So standardization is something that's really hot to us. And it's something that we try and not control, but sort of like keep within that framework, if that makes sense, just so that everybody's achieving as they should be, but also enjoying their programs in the best way possible as well, which I think is another key point that we should be making as well, in terms of learner enjoyment is crucial throughout this entire process as well.
Do we do something similar? So I guess when we standardize, and in our space we standardize a lot. So what the standardization is for is that learner X has the same experience of learner Y, regardless of what standard they are, where in the world they are. We want to make sure there's consistency. But from an operational point of view, we encourage and we empower the team to have those. So we don't talk about them as inconsistencies. We talk about them as flexibilities, because we change the curriculum. So we have a core curriculum, but we change the curriculum to obviously suit the learner, but more it's to make sure that we meet the business need. And this is where the employer side comes from, because each brand, each business will have a different need, and through the training and through the apprenticeship we make sure that it's tailored that way. So although we have a core curriculum which makes sure that we hit the standards, there is a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, I think that's that key point of differentiation, going back to those age-old teaching strategies around, making sure that, and I completely agree with you, Jogita, in terms of, we work with a whole range of employers. Every employer has a different requirement of their apprenticeship standard. And I think that's really, really key to pick up on and make sure that you can factor that in terms of those flexibilities, for sure.
But what the standard does is give us the core. So we know.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually so much more flexibility than we ever had when we were delivering qualifications, because, you've got two sides of A4, and actually how you deliver that, it's amazing, because you can just be as innovative and creative as you want when you're designing those curriculum plans.
I like what you said, Jogita, around it's not necessarily an inconsistency, it's a flexibility, because we know our biggest strength within Reading Partnership is our one-to-one delivery from our employment advisors. So you're never going to have the same delivery from an employment advisor in our Peterborough office doing the exact same work in the exact same contract to one who's down in our supply chain Truro office. It's just not going to be that way, because their individual ability to interact with the participant is always going to be different. But again, I agree with what you were saying, Andy, around it's that kind of within that framework. And for us, that framework is our commissioner requirements, but everything else in terms of the service delivery can be flexible. One of the ways in which we really try and overcome that kind of rogue going out, changing things willy-nilly and not having any sort of framework or parameters to that is the work that our continuous improvement executives do. And we make sure that that relationship and that bond between operations and their personal representative for their contract is really tight and really close, so that when those opportunities for change and flexibility, and I think I want to try this, or I might want to pilot this, it's raised right at the forefront, where we can be like, what support do you need? And we can then give that hand holding, frameworks, opportunities, methodologies.
I think it's that culture. We were talking about embedding that continuous improvement culture right at the start. So it could be when somebody from the quality team ring, they go, oh my gosh, what have I done? Or it could be, oh, so I'm looking for some support. So I think that mindset shift is very much about the culture of that continuous improvement.
Yeah. And I really like that idea that you were saying there, Dani, that notion of that they want to try something new or different, and therefore they're using your CI executives in order to help them to think through the risks inherent with making that change, because there might be some, but actually not stifling that freedom and flexibility. I think we won't get into the debate around this, because we'll let other people argue about policy and so on, but there's definitely something when you sit in a heavily regulated space that risks stifling innovation. So a perfect example of that with you see it more arguably on the Ofsted side because of the nature of this isn't I'm not framing this as being a negative about Ofsted, actually it's the nature of the regulation, is that if you know you're coming into an Ofsted window, I notice with our clients with my Mesma hat on, they might be less inclined to make changes during that period of time because of the potential of that. Now I absolutely know that is not what an inspection regime would want, and actually in many ways would welcome that there, but I completely understand why people are nervous about doing that. And the same for employability, that you may know that you have audit visits coming up, and therefore there's a risk sometimes to or the mitigate or the management of that risk feels a little bit more like it weighs more heavily in that space. So it would be wonderful if any of you are willing to share perhaps some examples of this is where it hasn't gone so well for us, or a barrier that we've had to overcome in order to make it work in practice.
In an organisation the size of ours especially, we've got around over 2,000 employees just working within Reading Partnership, not to mention our sort of subdivisions as well. But the resistance to change is such a hard one to overcome. And I think one of the things that we've learned is when you do get that resistance to change, it's not necessarily the change, it's the adaptation. People hear change and they go, I've got to completely overhaul everything that I've ever thought, done, said, it's all got to go. And actually that's not what we're asking. We're actually asking for willingness to adapt. And I think people kind of misconstrue the two phrases. And one big lesson that we've learned through a lot of recent projects is you're going to get pushback, you're going to get resistance. The natural sort of position is, well, you're pushing here, well, I'm going to push back here. And actually the biggest and best thing we can do is bend with that and think, why are we getting that resistance in the first place? If we're getting it now, it's going to be tenfold down the line when we actually really need to make this change count. So while we're still in that opportunity to potentially bend and flex, let's bend and flex with that resistance that's coming back and think, is this the right thing at the right time? Have we gone about this the right way? And, questioning why that is. But I think that's something it's definitely been very prevalent with a lot of the opportunities that we've tried to bring about change and new to the business, for sure.
I really like this idea that you put in there, which is using it, if you like, as a gateway around saying, actually, what's the reason for that resistance? Because it might be that the reason for that resistance is we're trying to put something in at the wrong time, or we're trying to put something in that isn't the right thing to do. And I do wonder sometimes as leaders that perhaps we push against that too much because people are just resistant to change, when the reality is there might be a perfectly good reason for that being there, and really listening to that.
One of the most common challenges I have is it's the short-term thinking. So they don't vision what that's going to be long-term and what the impact's going to be long-term, because they just want what's here and now. And the danger in that, and I've been culprit of that, is we put a band-aid on it, or we fix the symptom and don't go to the root cause because we just want to fix it really quickly. And that is the short-term thinking. And it's taken me a while to recognize that, but quite often they don't understand what the long-term strategy is and what direction we're going in.
If you look at kind of some of the models out there, if we go a bit academic about it, even if you look at Kotter's model of change, or if you look at the Prosky-Adkar model, what they all emphasize is that you have to get people on board with the reason for change before you give them a view of a sparkly future. Because actually I can sit and nod at a sparkly future, but if I haven't really got the reason to do anything different to the way I did it yesterday, because frankly I'm busy enough, I'm just going to go back to the thing that I did yesterday. Again, COVID was a stunning example of us moving towards doing lots of things online that we could have done perfectly well online before, but chose not to because it was easier to just carry on doing it the way it was. And you don't always, thankfully, get that kind of extreme event that triggers change. Now, sometimes with innovation, it doesn't come from a problem end. So you have to ask the question in a slightly different way in order to drive innovation, because if not, we're just problem fixing.
As you've picked up on, being so highly regulated we have new pieces of legislation, new regulations, changes in requirements that sort of like get introduced regularly. And as leaders within the sector, we're all really used to that, and we're all really quick and flexible in terms of going, oh, it's just the way the sector is, so we'll just run with it, and we'll we're really quick to react. But operationally, certainly we've found when we've taken on new trainers that have come from a really sort of stable environment that they've worked in previously, to then working in education, which is so rapidly changing with just incremental changes that happen quite regularly as well. And as leaders, I think sometimes we forget the impact that has operationally. Sometimes it's really catastrophized in terms of, this is going to have such an enormous impact on my job, what I have to do, and it's just another thing. And you can almost see that thought process, happening right in front of you when you're talking these things through. But actually, in terms of achieving that, once it's broken down and once we've changed process or policy or something like that, actually it's not as challenging as people can sometimes envision to begin with.
You are all so good. I could talk to you forever. Let me ask you a closing question, each of you, if I may. And my closing question is, if you could pick one thing out of this conversation that stood out for you, that you're going to kind of take away, in the spirit of us having a curious, continuous improvement mindset, what would be the thing that has stood out for you in the context of our conversation that you think, I'm just going to take that away actually and digest that and think about that a bit more?
Yeah, I think there was something that Jogita mentioned earlier in the session. We can't guess when it comes to quality and assurance. We have to go with what is presented to us from our participants, from our learners, from our customers. And I think the biggest thing to take away is, if we're not collecting that data and that feedback, we're operating blind.
I think I'm going to go with getting access to people that talk my language and understand the passion for quality and getting things right. I think we just need to share best practice. It's okay to trial and test stuff, and you don't have to get it right first time. And I think I said it earlier on, this is not a destination. That continuous mindset should be a journey.
Thanks, Jogita.
Actually, there's so much positivity around quality improvement, and I think we can all learn from each other. And going to the event last year, Lou, and having conversations like this is just amazing, to be able to sort of like free flow and just talk things through. It's really empowering as well. So yeah, it's been great.
It's wonderful, and we'll keep doing more of it as well. And I think just that bringing together of FE and employability for me is so exciting, because I'm very lucky that I kind of have one foot in each camp. And like I said, at the outset, when I think the four of us were talking, perhaps before we even pressed record, is the way the sectors do things is different, yet there is so much opportunity and crossover, about how we learn. If I were summarizing, it would be, if I were in FE, I would go to employability and look at the way they embrace CI as a process improvement piece, because it's far more prevalent within employability that CI is a whole organization activity than you tend to find within FE. I think what FE is particularly strong at is how it pulls in the learner voice, and has brought that in a way that, as Dani has already said, actually that's been the big, it's not that it wasn't there, but that's been the thing that has really, really shifted the dial within the employability space. So, let's keep talking and having the conversation. And on that note, I'm going to stop us so that we make Sally's job slightly easier. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
And speak soon, no doubt. Have a great weekend. Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
Amazing.
thanks for
Thank
the
you
invite,
so
Lou.
much. Yeah,
Nice to
thank
meet
you
you all.
Take
Bye.
care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.